Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie Farrington of Astropath. We're here today to talk about the exciting movement of Jupiter into Cancer. Before we jump into that, I just want to ask you all to do all the things, like and share and follow us and share us with your friends. So, Jennie, what is the big deal about Jupiter's movement into Cancer?
Hmm. Well, there's a lot of things going on in 2025. There's a lot of planets. Basically, everybody's going to be in a different sign of the outer planets by the time we get to 2026. So there's a big kerfuffle about all these planets moving, and Jupiter's included. Jupiter has been in Gemini for about a year, and now it's going to change signs and go into Cancer. And one of the nice things about this is most of the other planets are moving from inward yin signs to more outward yang signs. Jupiter's doing the opposite. Jupiter's moving from the excitable, chatty, gregarious sign of Gemini, and now it's moving into Cancer, which is very different. Inward sign, much more concerned with emotional nourishment and emotional issues. So it really is changing into this totally different place, and it's giving us an opportunity to look inwards while everything else is directing us to look
Mhm.
outwards. And I think that
Mhm.
is incredibly helpful. And we're all going to need that reminder, to just make sure that we are feeling good. So that's in a nutshell. In a nutshell, it's hard to say.
And Jupiter also is exalted in Cancer. It's
Right.
delighted to be there. In Cancer, Jupiter can really expand our understanding of our emotions, of our, deep emotional connections with others, our ability to nurture and care for and protect. All of those things are really, in a position to be really expanded during this upcoming year.
Yeah, and as soon as it moves into Cancer too, it's going to be at that 0 degrees of cardinal sign. So that really it's a Cancer is one of the signs that initiates things, one of those four cardinal signs. So it is initiating something new. If you think about Cancer as the sign that is related to sort of mothering and caring for new things or new beings, it's that it really is the initiating. It's like it gives birth to something, and there's a new being or thing. So it really kind of has that. It is something really new. So something is closing from Jupiter being in Gemini, and now there's a new start with it being in Cancer. So
Our focus of expanding all these ideas and thoughts and all of that expansion that's been going on for the past year is really settling down into the expansion of the emotions well, you want to open up the chart? Is now the time?
I can't. I was thinking we should talk a little bit more about what Jupiter itself
Oh,
means and by
okay.
itself, and then yeah,
Yeah.
does that
Yeah.
work? Okay.
Works absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that was what we agreed on, but I get confused. But Jupiter itself is, I think of it in a lot of ways, it's just kind of simple. Wherever Jupiter goes, it expands, it enlarges, it brings in ideas of generosity and philosophical growth as well. What else does Jupiter bring into the conversation?
Well, Jupiter can be a symbol for a lot of different things. It's one of the two bridge planets. So Jupiter
Mhm.
and Saturn are bridge planets. And what we mean by that is the other planets, including Sun and Moon, but then Mercury, Venus, and Mars, they refer to more, they're personal planets. And so they're more like your inner circle of all the different things that you're doing in your personal life. And then once you get to Jupiter and Saturn, then we're talking more about how does your life intersect with society? Like how
Mm.
do you branch out into those bigger concepts? So it really kind of it takes you to another level, and it also can be in a chart. It can be like your belief system.
Mhm.
It can be a place where you, as you already said, expand, but a place where you really want to bring meaning to things is
Mhm.
where, what Jupiter does in your natal chart. And then, like more on the mundane level, it can be the law, it can be religion, it can even be things like travel, it can be justice, like the bringing of justice, the balancing of scales. It has a little bit of that to it as well. So there's, and that's it is connected to law and religion in this mundane sense. But Lori and I mostly focus on what it means natally, and also by transit, it's really going to expand something, as it enters a new part of your life. It's going to really bring this expansive quality. And
And
because we're talking about Cancer too, it has that whole emotional layer in this period of time.
And I mean, as we talk about Jupiter, Jupiter is also it's considered the great benefic. It brings benefits. But you want to really be careful with Jupiter because there is, as with all the planets, there's the more positive and the more difficult side of them. And Jupiter also can bring in issues of overexpansion and overreach and overindulgence. There's all of those things that can happen when something expands as well. So you want to really pay attention to where growth turns into excess.
Yes, that's a great keyword. Excess in that, the less positive manifestation, and then abundance is a good keyword for the more positive.
Yeah.
And it was interesting too because I was reading up on it, and sometimes, quite often, in fact, Jupiter can be a player in things that are disastrous, like something big explosion or big disaster. Notice the word big being there. So it does expand. But the other way of thinking about that too is when something big happens, like a big disaster, the implications after the fact, the moral implications, the ethical
Mhm.
implications, it raises all these philosophical questions when something really intense happens and people are
Mhm.
trying to process and deal with and make meaning from when really, really dreadful things happen too. So, I like how you said, Laura, it's not like, oh, great, wherever Jupiter is, everything's wonderful and great. That is not necessarily the case. It's part of it is, well, what is it expanding? And I always think about there's levels of consciousness. If you're doing your work and you're trying to work on your things, then you're going to bring more conscious awareness to it. And if you don't, that's when sometimes you might be doing things that actually bring too much into your life and you didn't realize it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember really getting that lesson. So at some point when I was a lot younger, um, thinking about, I think I was having my Jupiter return, which is when Jupiter comes to the position of your natal Jupiter. And everything I'd ever heard about the Jupiter return is it's such a wonder, expect all this wonderful stuff. And boy, did I hit a wall. And in retrospect, it's clear that my expansion just went into way over excess. And, there's always a price to pay when you go into great over excess. So it is important to pay attention to both sides of what Jupiter is bringing to the table.
nice. Do you want to talk about Cancer a little bit more before we jump into the chart?
Sure, since that's where, if you think about this planet of Jupiter, this big planet, any sign that it's in, it's sort of, there's so many different ways you can think about that. You can think about the sign as the filter with, through which it has to show up in the world, or you can think of it as if you think of the planets as actors and the signs as I don't know, the costume they're wearing. You can think of Cancer as, what is Jupiter wearing? What does it have to express itself through? So Cancer is what it's expressing itself through. So it's around all the issues of Cancer, which are protection and support and love. Cancer is really about learning to love more than anything, don't you think?
Yeah, it has that like loving
Yeah.
sensitivity. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's responsible for bringing new life into the world.
Right, right. It is that initial beginning of love, of protection, of nurturance and care. It's in our culture, and I think Jenny and I have talked about this a lot in different ways in our videos that Cancer is, in our culture, we tend to think of sensitivity as weakness, and Cancer is one of the primary sensitive signs. It is not weak. This is a cardinal sign. It's an extremely powerful sign. Like you said before, it is about initiation. It's initiating the process of connection and love and care and protection.
Mm,
And, if you're protecting with a Cancer sensibility, there's nothing weak in that.
mm. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's really incredibly powerful to think about the power to give birth. It's the degenerative power, the procreative power. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anything that's stronger than that. When and if you're not sure, think about just like climate events, and when the water comes, like, good God, it just whisks things away. So it is actually incredibly powerful, and it is, regardless of whether you're interested in giving birth to a physical human child at this point in your life. Think about the process of having to grow new life, the initiation. That's why Cancer's, an initiatory sign. The initiation, having the birth, and then the growth, and having to protect what's happening to that growth, and then the actual birth process. I mean, good Lord, I can't think of any more process that there's nothing weak about the process of giving birth. I mean, good Lord. So you really just take on board the power of that sign.
I want to go off on a tiny tangent. I can't help it. It's just stuck in my brain. I was watching a program recently that talks about television's impact on culture.
Mm.
And it goes back to, I don't know what year it was, but the show Murphy Brown,
Oh,
where
yeah.
she gave birth.
Mm.
If you watch that scene of her giving birth, I think it was the first time on television that a birth was really represented in a really pretty direct and clear way, and how that scene of her really giving birth changed the entire culture because the vice president, Dan Quayle, freaked out and went on national television and talked about how Murphy Brown was destroying the culture by being a single woman giving birth. So, just the initiation, what this show was saying was that that program started the whole culture wars around motherhood and
Wow.
single women giving birth. And so, just thinking of that scene as an initiation for this huge cultural shift, it would be
Mm.
interesting to see when that was and where Jupiter was at that time.
Yeah. It's a little side project.
Anyway,
Loved it.
a little side note there. Sorry if I went off
Yeah.
on a tangent, but I thought that was really, really striking as far as the power of birth, even as it's represented in a way like that.
Yeah. Even like on a television show and changing a culture. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think it's great you bring that story, because this is exactly what we're talking about. It'd be easy to be like, well, I'm not a person who's, having children or something. So whatever, cancer, but it doesn't matter. It's a creative process regardless. The most literal way to understand it is, of a mother giving birth, a person giving birth. And that, that's the easiest way to get it.
that
Um,
push.
yeah. And but also, what's I think is interesting too is, so you mentioned that Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so we're talking about a planet that's really happy to be in a sign. And to understand exaltation, just think about the planet. It's being on a throne. It's in this place where it's uplifted. It's very powerful. It tends to imbue the kind of planetary expression with more of kind of an honorable, like, placement of high repute. It kind of brings that in.
Mhm.
I won't go into all the geeky reasons of why it might be considered that. It does have to do with Jupiter's rulership of Pisces, and being connected to water. So it does have that. But anyway, it's a really powerful and prominent placement. Um, and I would just encourage you to think about, what do you want to give birth to? We are all
Mhm.
creative beings. And this is a time to give birth to something that you hold dear. And it can be a creative project. It can be something to do with your profession. It could be something to do with your home life. I mean, it really can be, the sky's the limit of what you're working on creating. Or you might really be thinking about growing a family. So, I think,
Yeah, wherever Cancer is in your chart, something can be grown over this year in a
yeah.
big way once you tackle some of the difficulties that the period starts with.
Yeah, and on that note, shall we now take a peek
Yes.
at the chart?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna just put up the chart of the moment that Jupiter goes into Cancer. We don't want to go crazy with this chart, but we just wanted you to see there's one important thing. Here's Jupiter. There it is, 0 degrees of Cancer. And we don't want to get all crazy about every little thing in this chart, but we do want you to see the thing that you just cannot help but see, which is this. double square that's happening very early on because Saturn is at 1 degrees of Aries and Neptune at 2. That's what those two planets are. Lori, what does this say?
Well, it really, Jupiter's going to be in Cancer for a full year.
Hmm.
So what this says is just how it begins. It's just kind of reminding us that what the beginning of Jupiter's time in Cancer starts with is a difficulty. There's a difficulty. And Saturn has just stepped into Aries. Neptune's been in there a short period of time. So there's some difficulty, some way in which we are trying to dissolve the cobwebs and face reality of something that we are trying to take action on wherever Aries is in the chart. So there's some difficulty, there's some way in which expansion is struggling against restriction. It's feeling there is a restriction and a confusion that it has to move through before it really can fully embrace the expansion that the full year will bring.
Hmm. Yeah, once again, it has that gate feeling. I know we talk about gates a lot with Pluto, something have to go in through the gate, but this feels like a narrow aperture, and Jupiter just wants to expand. And it's like, wait, I'm supposed to fit through that little thing? I mean, that's a constriction, especially the
Yeah.
square to Saturn is this constriction. And I think what's interesting too, we've talked about Jupiter being pretty happy in Cancer. Well, Saturn is not happy in Aries. Like
Mm.
Saturn in Aries is a difficult configuration. Saturn is authority, and Aries just wants to hurry the hell up and get the thing done now. And Saturn's like, oh no, this is a long, slow process. And I think Saturn in Aries, it tends to bring about, it's not as reliable as Saturn can be. There's a impulsiveness to it that can really kind of shake it up and make things seem even more, I don't know, kind of tenuous in a funny way. And when you put Saturn and Neptune together, it's dissolving. I mean, there's a disintegration happening. And so there's this pressure that's coming from, this change, this disintegration, this, I know there's something going on there and Jupiter's like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Like,
Right.
I just
So,
want to grow.
yeah. So, yeah, this difficulty, it lasts how long? 2, 3 weeks?
Yeah, we think, really early July is when both Neptune and then Saturn are going to retrograde, and Jupiter will have moved like several degrees away by then. So it's really this first few weeks of having to push through something that it might even feel like, oh my God, there's no way I can do this. I can't expand the thing I want to expand. I mean, there's, Neptune is
Because there's something holding me
off.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's something constricting or holding. Exactly. So, and our advice is just that, well, this is only a few weeks. So
Push through it.
learn what there is to learn, yeah, from it. And I think it's more try to stay out of what can be the negative manifestation of Jupiter, which is the excess we talked about. There might be a tendency to overdo with this pressure feeling.
Mm. Yeah.
Just,
It's like, oh, I feel pressured, so I'm gonna just force it in a way that ultimately wouldn't be beneficial.
yeah. Yeah, so that's, and we do encourage you to watch a video. We've made our video about Saturn and Neptune and Aries. You can look through and we'll put the link to that video below to understand more about what that's about. But it's, it's hard to look at this Jupiter ingress. It's immediately bumping into these, like, I think it's June 15th and 18th. It's going to really be exact, that square. And then it, as we said, gets clear of it in July. So it's a little bit of a thorny thicket.
Yeah, there is. But yeah, once we're through it, really the process goes on for the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
you just have to get through this little piece.
Yeah, so we're not going to break down all the stuff in this chart. Actually, we're going
Oh,
to make this chart go away right now
yeah.
and just talk a little bit more about the other, yeah, just a couple other
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about was, well, there's a few things. The last time Jupiter was in Cancer was from June of 2013 to July of 2014. If you think back to that time, something around family, roots, home, nurturing, all of those things of Cancer, something that was activated during that period of time, you might really notice there's an echo of those things going on beginning now. So, thinking about that. And the other thing we wanted to talk about here was where Jupiter has been for the past year, right?
Yes. Yep.
What do you
And
want to say? You can talk about that.
just it's being Gemini, so in other words, it's been expanding the way we think, expanding the way we learn, some kind of communication we need to have, or some new way of thinking about some process. That's a mutable air sign, so it really has been this expansion in the way that we're trying to talk. I mean, in
Yeah.
essence.
Yeah. Ideas, communication, all those Gemini things
Mhm.
has been where there has been expansion over the past year. So taking that expansion, and Jupiter in Gemini can be kind of buzzy, right? It's like,
Yeah,
mhm.
unstable.
Yeah,
Like,
unstable. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of anxiety can go along with that. So now with Jupiter, it's sort of setting that aside and going into this
yeah.
much more comfortable, deeper process of expanding. If you think about the intellect expanding through Gemini and now going into Cancer, it just brings up ideas of emotional intelligence. The intellect has been expanding, now bringing that to the emotions.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about this when you add that picture to the idea that we've also had the planet Mars doing an extended retrograde period, and having that go on, and it's been in Cancer, or was in Cancer, I should say, for quite a period of time. Like certainly the whole first part of the year, up into the middle of April, Mars was retrograde and going through Cancer, and possibly stirring up some trouble. Like I definitely was thinking about that as a potential ordeal one had to go through,
Mm,
because it was in Cancer for part of that. I think of a lot of things around emotional reactivity, like places where we felt aggravated or frustrated or strung out, or too much going on and just feeling possibly aggravated. It could also be energizing, but certainly Mars going through Cancer, it's not a position it loves to be in. So I would just say that now Jupiter's following on Mars's heels and now going into Cancer, it's an opportunity to integrate not only the fact that Jupiter was in Gemini, so expanding the way we think, but also coming in to kind of help us with whatever ordeal we went through or issues that we're going through, and integrate them and make them into meaning, to have a better understanding of whatever that difficult thing was that you might have gone through. Of course, it depends on your natal chart. If you had planets that were particularly being struck by that, you could
mhm.
have gone through something pretty intense. I know the beginning of my year was pretty nuts. I think about Mars being in my first house, and there I had, flooded basement. There's a good water thing for you, and some illnesses that were going on with my partner, myself, and so on. So there's a lot going on, and now Jupiter's coming in to say, okay, well, what the hell did all that mean? What did we just learn?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jupiter's ability and need to bring meaning.
Mm-hmm.
That's really great to think about it that way. The other thing we wanted to mention is that Jupiter will be retrograde between, oh dear, I thought I had the dates written down here. Between November and March. I don't have the
Yeah.
exact dates, but November and March. So the retrograde will start at 25 degrees and go back to 15 degrees. So if you have planets in any of the cardinal signs, which are Aries. My brain just has gone totally blank. Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Any of those cardinal signs between 15 and 25 degrees, that period of time is going to, I would say that's the period you're going to really want to make sure you're not going into overextension.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's when it's doing
Yeah.
its retrograde is going to be really when you're going to really want to pay attention to that. So pay attention
Yeah.
to that period of
Yeah.
time.
Especially if you have something at the 15 or the 25,
Yeah,
because that's where it's
that's where it'll
actually stationed.
station.
So
Yeah.
it'll hold that degree for a long period of time. So definitely I was like, ooh, I got something. I got something at 25. So I'm like, oh, I know what that'll be interesting. But those are the important turning
Ooh.
points of just understanding, what
I
those are.
hadn't even really thought of that because I have something at 15. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what's up with that.
Yeah, we'll see what's up with that, won't we?
Okay. Well, I think anything else about I think we've kind of covered the things. So what we're
I
gonna
think
do
so.
now is the individual impacts, and we're gonna try to look at the year ahead as a synopsis. So all
Yes.
right,
All right, let's take a
ready for
look
some
at
of
that.
that? Okay, so we're gonna start, of course, with dun, 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 Aries rising. Okay. I think that is that me or is that you? What do we decide? I think it's
Oh,
you.
that's you. You're doing fire and air.
Oh yeah, okay.
I
Not
mean, we're
about
both doing both, but you're
that.
starting and I'm
Yeah,
starting.
okay. No, sorry about that.
That's
All right,
okay.
so let's just take it right out of the gate here. With Aries rising, Jupiter is moving into your fourth house. The fourth house, in a nutshell, is your home. You can think about this multiple ways. It can be your physical house. It can be the people you share your home with. It can be your family of origin, even. It can be your ancestry. So that kind of brings it further back. And it also can be a connection with physical land, a place that you love, a place maybe that you live, that you really have a connection to the place. So those are all things that you can think about that Jupiter is asking for expansion. It also there's an emotional level too. It's also your emotional roots, your emotional foundation. It kind of harks back to your upbringing, your early upbringing, and any kind of subconscious patterns that may have been taken hold during that time. So with Jupiter moving into that fourth house, those are all of the types of topics it is expanding on. And you have a whole year to really look at that and to notice what's going on. You also want to be careful in this time, of course, to not overextend. That's going to be something you want to watch out for, is taking your emotional temperature, making sure you're not overdoing it. But otherwise, it's a place where you can have more abundance at this time.
Yeah.
And you want to bear in mind that before this, Jupiter has been in Gemini. So you've had a whole year before this to really expand the way you think about things, expand something that you've learned. Maybe you've expand something to do with a sibling. I mean, those are all third house things, or your neighbor, or your neighbors, I should say. So think about what you've learned in the last year. How has Jupiter invited you to expand your voice and your way of thinking? And then now, as it's moving into Cancer, what is it bringing with it? So I think that that is an important thing to consider during this time. And it also may be that there may have been some difficulties and some struggles in your home life. And with Jupiter moving in here, it's time to take what you've learned from expanding your voice, take what you've learned from whatever that difficulty in your home life was, and just bring a greater understanding and expand your roots in that way. So yeah,
Yeah.
Lori, what would you like to add?
Well, the thing I want to add is that first few weeks of this period of time, there's going to be like that gateway that we talked about earlier in our conversation of some difficulty in that first few weeks. And for you, that difficulty is coming from your own understanding of yourself. You don't want, there's a part of you, the way I imagine it is there's some way in which your connection with your home and family wants to just expand. You want to reconnect with family members, perhaps something along those lines. And yet there's a part of your understanding of yourself that's like, no way. I'm still angry at them. Because yeah, that's how I see this. Do you see another way of thinking about that? There's some way that you don't quite want to expand this area. And, it'll pass, but in those first few weeks, you're cranky about it.
Yeah, I mean, the first house is like you, the self, and you might kind of want it your way with these big players, in that area of your life now. Like you kind of want to, just maybe, like you just said. I mean, I think you've covered it. Like you want it your way, and you know what? You have to consider the impact on your family and your home life. And yeah, once you move through that, you're going to
And
start.
ultimately on you. I mean, this really gives you an opportunity to structure and stabilize yourself through a deeper emotional understanding of your family connections, your ancestral line. It
Mhm.
really, this is really a great opportunity. It might feel a little difficult
Yeah. It's a
in
great
that first
opportunity.
early weeks. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
opportunity.
Like for maturing, just kind of
Yes.
maturing might be this sort of childish part of yourself that
Yeah.
it's time.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, I like how you brought that into it. Okay, next,
Yeah.
Taurus rising.
Let's talk about those of you who have Taurus rising, and this brings the attention of Jupiter going into Cancer to your third house. Now, you know, as with all the houses, there's different levels to think about it on. The third house can be speaking about issues around how you use your voice, how you think and consider things just on a day-to-day routine level of your mindset. You can also think of the third house as the people in your life that you didn't really choose, such as your siblings, your neighbors, your neighborhood itself can be part of this third house. There's a real emotional connection that you bring with you to this area. And right now, that connection is ready for expansion. So it's like your connection to your own emotional intelligence and your ability to articulate your emotional intelligence. That's what really wants to expand, I would say. So, Jupiter's been going through your second house for the past year, expanding your understanding of money, resources, and your own self-worth. It's sort of like your self-worth has expanded over the past year, and now it's time to take that understanding that you've gathered and bring it into your ability to use your voice and your emotional intelligence. And of course, there's a challenge at the start of this, and there's also been a struggle here. And I'm going to let you talk about those two pieces.
Okay, Lori. Well, one thing to think about is think back over the past few months too, and consider if anything of challenge has arisen that has to do with the way you use your voice. Maybe you've had a conflict with siblings. Maybe you've had a conflict with somebody in your local neighborhood. Um, could be something else, but think about that. What have you been forced to face or deal with that maybe wasn't very pleasant, maybe wasn't very fun? And now with Jupiter moving into your third house, you have an opportunity to understand that better, to have a greater degree, perhaps, of empathy for yourself and the others involved. So that is really nice. Now, right when Jupiter enters Cancer, it also encounters some struggle, some difficulty. And for those of you with Taurus rising, this struggle and difficulty has to do with possibly your subconscious patterns of a way that you can't quite see yourself, that you've had some confusion and you've not really known like how, you're trying to learn, how to mature better in this part of your life. You're trying to see yourself better. And that is the first thing that might kind of come at odds when Jupiter moves into Cancer and it just wants to expand and be beneficial in this your voice, but there's something kind of in the way that you've been forced to look at, and in your hidden away in your subconscious. It's not a very easy place to look. And
Mhm.
also, another thing that could have gotten in your way is the potential for some sort of illness, or something that has stopped you in your tracks and that you didn't expect, you never saw it coming, and you've had to deal with that. And so, right when Jupiter moves into Cancer, you're still kind of dealing with that. You're dealing with this thing that has kind of stopped you in your tracks and that you're having to really look at in a new way. But once Jupiter gets clear, sort of early July, it starts really taking off in Cancer. You'll be able to see that better, and you'll kind of feel like you've gone through this narrow little pass of understanding, and you'll be able to start integrating all of these things that you've learned and really getting more in touch with your emotions and how you want to talk about your feelings
Yeah.
to other people.
Yeah, it's like I think there's some way in which your psychological patterns have to be, you have to face reality about something in that area in order for you to really use your voice the way Jupiter wants you to expand it. But you have to pass through that little narrow gate and really understand yourself in a way that's difficult and new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was just thinking probably because this is my sister's and the third house is sisters. I'm like, and there's some benefit your sibling can bring to you and all of this.
Well,
But
it
it's true, our
is.
relationship's really good right now. So I mean, think about too, like what
Yeah.
benefits might come, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Benefits of using your voice, benefits of your connections with siblings or neighbors or, yeah, those people you didn't choose, but all of a sudden you realize how delightful your sister is.
that's right. Thank you, Lori.
I like that.
Um, okay. Should we move on?
Yes, let's move on.
Gemini rising. Um, so those of you with Gemini rising, Jupiter moving into Cancer means that Jupiter's moving into your second house. You know, the quickest thing to think about here is money. The second house is money. It's your finances. It's your possessions. And so therefore it's also your resources. So it's all of those topics. In the psychological world of astrology, it also brings it to the level of self-worth. So those are the topics, all of those things that have to do with value, essentially. And with Jupiter moving into your second house, that's what's getting bigger. So you want to be, careful here. Like you do not want to be repeating like negative self-talk or ways that you do not think of yourself in a positive light. This is time to turn that and to be taking advantage of the positive things that Jupiter can bring here, the increase in potentially finances, the increase in the way you think about all of these things, the increase in, quite honestly, being able to love yourself on a deeper level. I mean, having Cancer in your second house, your emotional connection to yourself is very important for how you feel about all of the things. And you also might be pretty intuitive about financial stuff.
Mhm.
So those are really well connected. As you nourish your emotional layers, and you're also shining up your or sharpening up your intuition. And I think that could all be very useful as Jupiter moves in here. Um, let's remember that Jupiter was in Gemini for a year before this. So you've really had an opportunity to experience Jupiter in your first house, expanding all the things that are Gemini about you, expanding your networking, expanding your communication, expanding your voice in some way. I can think about someone with this who is a singer and their band has really been,
Mhm.
expanding in that time period when Jupiter was in Gemini. So
Mhm.
now we have an opportunity to take that and begin to integrate it in the way you feel about yourself and maybe integrate it into an increase in resources. So that's how you want to think about the two together. There is a couple of potential trip ups that Lori, you want to talk about that stuff?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I do want to say, watch out for an overextension around money. Jupiter going
Yes.
to the second house, you really want to be careful. But the first few weeks that Jupiter is in Cancer until early July, basically, you this is not easy to get this expansion going, to really be doing that emotional expansion around your ability to receive money or really connect with your own self-worth. And the difficulty that comes in those first few weeks comes from a way in which you have to be facing reality around your ability to receive from the larger community or just from others. How do you allow yourself to receive? It's really interesting because it kind of connects so directly. That's the struggle that you face at the beginning of the season is, am I willing to receive?
Mm,
And you're going to hit a wall there. Or am I willing to spend? There might be that too. And they're going to be very connected. Am I willing to spend money in my ability to connect with others? How do those two work together? I can really see this in a person I'm thinking about with Gemini rising as well. But there's, that first few weeks, you're going to struggle with that. What does spending mean for your own self-worth, and how does it connect you or disconnect you from receiving from the larger community? So once you get through that and move forward, you're going to really be able to expand in that area of your self-worth and your finances. The other piece is what's been going on for the past number of months that has probably kind of a difficulty around this area, a struggle, a challenge that has come along that has really changed your attitude around how you receive, how you spend, how you think of your own worth in this area. There's been some sort of a challenge there that this period of time is going to really allow you to integrate and allow you to, yeah, expand your own self-worth and your connection to your resources.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, like, early on, just after Jupiter enters Cancer, and it kind of hits this, that you were talking about the challenge around the ability to receive. And it could be too that there's something external in your community that just ends up shutting you down for some reason or another. Like it could be a very sort of a reality check of just something that changes, that there's just, not money for something anymore, or there just isn't, there's a big shift. I mean, that there is a potential for things to really change in a way that you hadn't quite anticipated, that can have a ripple effect on your finances. So something changes in the social environment, which means that your job's not the same, and then it can affect your finances too. So the embrace happens around that second house, of
Yeah.
uh, embracing yourself, embracing what you can, like seeking to expand your financial resources for benefit in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah. You might find yourself not being able to afford to keep up with your community, to go on that trip or something, or just the opposite. Your community um, can't be there with you. There's some way in which yeah, that's the struggle there. Huh.
Yeah, some question about resources,
Yeah.
public resources, personal resource,
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let us know
Interesting.
what that is.
Huh. Yeah. Send
um,
us a note. Drop a note below.
okay, let's move on to Cancer rising.
Yes, okay. So for those of you who have Cancer rising, this is such a personal thing, obviously. Jupiter is moving into your first house. You tend to be a person that wears your heart on your sleeve. You show up as a very sensitive, caring, giving person, and that part of your personality, that part of you that wants to protect others, to comfort others, and all of those things wants to expand. So that's what Jupiter is going to be expanding over this coming year, is your own personality in that way. Now, for the past year, Jupiter's been moving through your 12th house, expanding your intellectual understanding of your own psychological patterns, your own, maybe your spiritual understanding, something, behind the scenes that you don't really see real clearly, but Jupiter has really been expanding your understanding there. So at this point, you're really bringing that internal understanding into your personality. So that's really what the expansion is. Now, there's been for quite some time now, there's been some struggle around how you show up in the world, some struggle in how you present yourself, how other people see you. And this period of time will really allow you to integrate and settle that. At the beginning of this period of time with this year, we're going to hit a wall. You're going to hit a bit of a difficulty for the first couple of weeks till early July. Where's that difficulty coming from, Jenny? I think you must know this one.
There's a lot of pressure coming from, in a nutshell, your profession. Now, not everybody has a profession, so it can be your most public face, your public persona. that shows up. There's some kind of pressure coming from maybe what your perception is of the public expecting from you and what path you really want to take. So there's some challenge there, but I can tell you that the challenge is there so that you can mature, so that you can learn how to integrate, that professional face or that public face, with the more personal aspects of yourself. I mean, that is certainly what it is there for. And I think with Jupiter moving into your first house and being a Cancer rising person, there's a big question here around your intuition. This is an opportunity to heal that which blocks your way, which you've had that opportunity with Jupiter, as you said, in Gemini. If you've done the therapeutic work behind the scenes, now is an opportunity to really move into the space where you can trust your intuition on a deeper level, and you can step more into that intuitive sense that you have about everything as you move through the world. I mean, that's really what having Cancer rising is about. And there's always that challenge around, I think that pressure you might feel like in the latter half of June and early July, it might be tempting to overextend, to really just kind of go balls to the wall. And that's the phrase that pops in my mind, and overdo it. And I think that the greater question here is, how can you balance the resources that you have? I mean, because the thing is with Cancer rising is it also means that you have sensitivity. You need retreat. You need time to step back as well. And so that is an important lesson I think all of us are trying to learn, is when to also rest and step back. And that will be part of your big question right as Jupiter first moves in. And the lessons that you have learned in the last few months, the therapeutic exercises hopefully you've been doing, will all come into play to help you to really take advantage of this Jupiter and Cancer time as a time perhaps to heal something you've never been able to before, and give birth to a new self, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really embracing a in your own trust in yourself,
Mm.
a, a belief in yourself. It's really bringing that I can believe in myself.
Yes. I think, yeah, it really, really is.
I like that. That's really
Good.
nice.
I'll do my best with it.
Okay, do your best with it.
Okay, shall we move on?
Moving on.
All right, Leo rising. Um, okay, that's you.
Oh,
No, it's me.
no, it's you.
I Goodness
You
grief.
almost tricked me.
I know. I almost did it. All right, you are a Leo, that's true. But
And
anyway,
so are
those of
you.
you with Leo rising, um, Jupiter in Cancer is in your 12th house. So Jupiter's moving into the 12th house. And wow, this is an interesting one. This is a dramatic time to increase your inner knowing, to get in touch with the things that are usually like hidden from your view. So in the psychological, perspective, you can think about that as the processes that are churning away. And it was anyone with Cancer in the 12th house too, like your emotional content is not the easiest to get to. It's hidden, it's tucked away. It means that you have to really, I don't know, I think take time away from society to understand more about your emotional self. And with Jupiter moving into this 12th house, this is a really important time to integrate uh, different things into your life. This is a time to pay close attention to feelings that you have behind the scenes. If you have
Mm.
psychic downloads that are coming into this time, if you have information coming in, I think this is going to be a really, really important time to pay attention. You can think about Jupiter as being this huge antenna that's being
Mm.
extended in your 12th house. And so during this time, you really have the capacity to take on new things and information that you're not even quite sure where it came from. So not the easiest to talk about 12th, going into the 12th house there, but it is interesting. Part of the picture is the fact that Jupiter has been in Gemini for quite some time. So for the previous year, you've really had an opportunity to expand your social groups, expand your socializing, expand your notion of community, expand your ability to receive from that community. So that you've really had an opportunity to see what Jupiter can do. So now having it move into your 12th house is really a period of being able to integrate that learning about what society needs into a more sort of spiritual outlook or spiritual perspective. And the other thing you want to think about is when you're pondering, I wonder what all this could be, is that for the past few months, that area has been stirred up. Your 12th house has been stirred up. Perhaps there's been some aggravations or some health issues or things like that that have really tried to get your attention. And they may have been annoying and difficult and hard, like not hard, I already said that, but sort of triggering is what
Yeah.
it might be quite a bit of reactivity. And now with Jupiter going here, you're going to be able to understand that. You're going to have a greater context. You're going to be able to look at the greater meaning of those
Yeah.
issues.
I,
So,
I was thinking about what you're saying about the difficulty that's been going on in that area. And for people with Leo rising, I think, yeah, you might have just come to an understanding about some of your own internal deep patterns that you don't like. Something has been brought to your attention that stirs up all this deep internal angst that Jupiter is ready to expand your understanding of so that you can integrate it. Now, when we first start this process with Jupiter in Cancer, there is that few week period of time until, early in July where there's a difficulty that has to be addressed. And for you, it really comes in some way, it comes from your worldview. I think of it like, on a really simple example level, it would be Jupiter going into your 12th house, like I'm going to expand this deep internal spiritual understanding, that opening the mind to information that comes from other places. And yet, I don't believe in that stuff. My worldview says that's a bunch of hooey.
yeah.
So I kind of have to struggle with that before I allow this expansion to really happen. I have to face the reality of my worldview may be limiting me. So I may need to work on my worldview in order to allow this internal expansion.
Yeah. Or you might have encountered some sort of block where you need more education, where you want to practice maybe you're trying to incorporate a spiritual component, with a profession or something like that. And there might be that you need to go back to school, like you just don't have the credentials that you need. And sort of like you might have to be turning a no into a yes. Like there might be something that is a no,
Yeah.
like right at the beginning of this, and you're like, oh God, and then you'll see a way through where you can kind of make that into a yes. And maybe that does mean some kind of higher education or something else, there's some kind of, or the other thing it could be is like critical thinking, like, but I think you've already covered that with the worldview. Like there's something about your worldview that might need to be,
Yeah.
you
You
need to
might
mature it
really,
in some way.
yeah, there's some way in which you really need retreat or an exploration of something in the way of therapy or spiritual work that you really need to work on. Now, when
Mm,
we think about the flip side of Jupiter, the overextension, I can imagine this could be, avoidance of that.
yeah,
So you want to think about what's expanding and what's expanding into. I think of it almost like you could hide behind something that,
yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to do this great spiritual work, but you're really just hiding behind it. There's a word for that, isn't there? I can't remember what it is.
Mm.
It's something
Yeah, it's like sort of like a almost,
spiritual.
well, it's kind of like spiritual avoidance, really. Just like I'm gonna do the spiritual thing, so I'm not gonna do the concrete thing that's actually gonna give me the degree. Like that could be, it could be
Right,
that
right.
that's where you're going or not, but
Yeah, I was thinking of the name of a book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche that was about Oh, there's something about, using spirituality as something to hide behind,
Yeah.
you know, but
Well, yeah.
work with it.
You're thinking example is like, doing a certain meditation practice that you always do, and it's really just rote at this point, and it isn't actually supporting your growth. It's just something that, yeah,
Yeah, so you really want to look at, what is really expanding your internal sense of I love how you talked at the very beginning about the antenna, because there is information available to you here. You want to make sure that it's really coming from an authentic place and that you're not allowing your worldview to somehow stop the true expansion.
yeah, and a lot of times when we feel pitted against ourselves and you think it's either or, the actual answer is both. And having to figure out how to do both in a way that they fit together. They're not at odds with each other. So that's often the thing. So it's kind of like this: the spiritual understanding goes with the higher education, and they go together. And
Yeah.
it's for you to decide what's the best way for you wherever you are in your life, to which, how do you go about pursuing that so that you get both under your feet.
That's interesting. Okay, I think we've done this one. Let's go
All right.
on to Virgo.
Let's go on. All right.
Okay, so if you have Virgo rising, Jupiter, as it moves into Cancer, is moving into your 11th house. And the 11th house, the 11th house is about the community that supports you. As with all the houses, there's many ways we can kind of think about this and look at this. In my early studies, the 11th house was always talked about as our hopes and dreams for the future. And really, the way I think about the 11th house is that it relates to the communities that support us to what we desire, the communities that, yeah, that support us, that uplift us. It can include friends and maybe even family members, but generally speaking, the 11th house is less personal than that. It is like-minded others that support us. So as with Virgo rising, this is a place that holds a lot of sensitivity for you. It's a place where you really on an emotional level, you need this kind of support from community. And as Jupiter moves in here, you have the opportunity to really expand and build on creating or bringing yourself into a community that really brings that kind of emotional support to you. Over the last year, with Jupiter moving through Gemini, there's been a lot of expansion in your career or your social reputation in some way. That area of your life has really expanded. So, your job here, part of it, is to utilize what you have grown in your career life and bring that into community, however that looks. Possibly your career has just kind of provided more opportunities to increase your community. There's a lot of different ways that that could play in. But as we get going here, we also know that in the last some months, there's been some aggravation around community or some frustration. Maybe you just have felt disconnected from community, even though you know it's something you really need. There's some way in which there's been some difficulty there that Jupiter is now here to help you integrate and heal that problem and expand that area. As we start this process, where is the challenge coming from?
Well, right when Jupiter enters Cancer, it immediately gets entangled. And what it ends up happening is that, as much as Jupiter wants to expand, and in Cancer wants to nourish and make everything fluffy and emotionally connected, it encounters this restriction right out of the gate where, whoa, there's this intensity. Like right when it's trying to expand, it suddenly feels as if it's being made small. and that it actually has to contend with some annoyances. And for anyone with Virgo rising, this is coming from, I mean, in a nutshell, other people's issues, like a way in which you perceive other people's baggage, other people's connection to their own values, or the way they handle their resources, all those kind of sticky places where it's kind of easy to have judgment about other people's stuff, or, or sort of simplify it. But it's actually pretty thorny and thick. And no matter what, we all have to deal with that. We all have to, work with the issues of other people. So that's kind of what comes into play. So this could be something like you're all ready to expand and join this great community, and guess what? Your nemesis is there. Somebody you just don't like and you can't deal with, and you're like, ugh. And so the temptation would be to say, well, the hell with it, I'm not joining the group, or oh, I want to push them out or something, right? It would be this temptation to kind of do either or. And the invitation here is to kind of sit with that, let that be part of what you need to understand about yourself. Let that be part of the way that you handle your relationships, even some of your intimate ones. Let there be a greater understanding so that you can really expand in this social group that you're looking at in a way that's positive, and also in a way that has more depth to it, like more resilience, more understanding of how to cope with it when so and so you don't like so much is there, and how do you deal with that? Because we always have those people in our lives, no matter what, and you can't run away from that. You've got to face it. And so, really, what this turns into is an opportunity for you to really mature in a way that you've never been able to before, and hold authority in a way, in a positive way that you've never been able to before in this community. So, that's kind
Yeah.
of what the suggestion is, right?
I think there's also, when I think about it, it's like whatever the issue is that is coming from someone else's baggage that is trying to stop you, or, there's that conflict. Your job is to figure out how to set the boundaries so that you can go ahead and expand your community.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what the invitation is when I look at this is set the boundaries and expand your community.
Yeah.
Set the
Yeah.
boundaries either with that person that's your nemesis, or that person, in your life that is
Mhm.
wants to hold your you back in some way.
Mm.
Not necessarily consciously wanting to hold you back, but to maintain that connection, you feel held back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
There's
I
something.
definitely see this. I definitely see this. It's quite interesting. Expanding community. Bring it on.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good clues. I mean, you've already mentioned this, but there's a lot of good clues to whatever you've been through in the last few months, because some kind of ordeal or issue or something that's already stirred the pot on this issue. So you already have a sense, right, of what it is. And now, because of that, and because of everything you've learned through your professional life, you have this ability to integrate it in a new way. So I think that's what's exciting about it, and expand overall.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's great. Okay, let's move on to Libra rising.
let's move on. So Libra rising. Those of you with Libra rising, Jupiter moving into Cancer means that this expanding planet is moving into your most public area of your life. For a lot of people, that is your work life, your profession, the place where you spend the majority of probably your daylight hours. But it also can just be how you show up socially, your social reputation. So, whatever's happening, Jupiter moving into the 10th house, I mean, that's really pretty awesome, or it
Mhm.
can be if you work with it. But it really is this capacity for expanding in a whole new way that has to do with again, your social reputation and your profession. I mean, maybe you're at a critical juncture in your work life and you're ready to take more. Ready to get a promotion or get an expansion in some way that is going to help you with your finances. I mean, that could be part of what this is. But no matter what, this expanding energy is happening in that really public part of your life.
Mm.
Now, when you think back to where Jupiter has been for the last year in Gemini, cruising through your ninth house, you've really been able to open your mind to new
Mm.
things. Maybe you've had a whole bunch of new ideas. There's maybe new ways of communicating. in interacting and experiencing life in general. Perhaps you've been philosophizing and you have a whole new kind of outtake of how you look at things. And so that process is now taking you into a deeper level. When Jupiter moves into Cancer, it's asking you to integrate the emotional level to your understanding and bring your, it's an older, deeper part of yourself, quite honestly.
Hmm.
So you have an opportunity to integrate that on a new level. And the other thing is that you may have encountered some snags
Yeah.
in the last few months. You may have dealt with some irritations and annoyances and that has to do with your public life.
Hmm.
And so now's your opportunity to kind of integrate all these learnings that you've had into this expanded way of moving into the public part of your life.
Huh. As you're talking about that, I'm thinking about, Cancer there at the top of the chart. You are seen as someone who's very, motherly or nurturing or something. And maybe that has been really something that's been aggravating you. Maybe motherhood itself or nurturing in a public view has
Mm-hmm.
really caused a lot of frustration in this most recent period of time. But the other piece that we want to think about is as Jupiter enters Cancer, for those first few weeks until early in July, there is some difficulty that we have to move through before this expansion can really um, develop. And that difficulty for you is coming directly from a partner of some sort, whether it be your spouse or your business partner or some other contractual relationship. There's some way that someone or your own understanding of who you are as a partner, that could also, it might not be the person directly, it might be your understanding of who you need to be in partnership, but there's something from that area that is really restricting that movement into expansion. So you need to just manage that, deal with that, move through that. By early July, you'll be able to just
Hmm.
open up to the expansion.
Yeah. Part of that issue could be just I always think about that we live in this society that everybody's coupled. You gotta have a couple, and it also could be that you're not in a couple. And part of what you're trying to deal with is managing that. And there could be too that there's like a work event and you're like, I don't have a date, like what that's everyone's gonna have their person and I'm not doing that, or I don't that's not my choice of how I want to live, or I'm not doing that right now, or whatever. And that might be part of a feeling of restriction. So I just wanted to kind of add that piece because it can be tough, especially as a Libra rising person. It's like kind of wanting to fit into society in some way. And if you don't have that partnership, it could be like, this is interesting.
Or if that partnership just doesn't look like people expect it to look or
Exactly.
whatever.
I
Yeah.
know you're
I mean,
polyamorous or
yeah, there's so
well,
many ways that that could really play out. That's interesting. Okay, let's move on.
okay, let's do Scorpio rising.
Hmm.
Yeah, water.
Okay, so if you have Scorpio rising, this puts Jupiter's movement into Cancer, brings it right into your ninth house, expanding your understanding of the world at large. We can think of that ninth house as basically, I think of the ninth house as your worldview, but it includes all the experiences in your life that build up to create your worldview. The worldview doesn't just come out of nowhere, it comes from our experiences, which really include things like education and travel and, you know, politics and religion, even. These are all things that really make up our worldview. So over the last year, Jupiter was busy moving through your eighth house, really teaching you an awfully lot about how, kind of expanding your understanding of how to set boundaries, how to navigate other people's deep issues. And now it's going into your worldview. That's an interesting movement, isn't it? It's like you've really learned how to navigate other people's stuff. And now you're ready to kind of express and bring forth this expansion of your worldview.
Mhm.
So, that's basically what's going on there. There's been some challenge in that area over the last few months. There's been some difficulty, some frustration maybe in how you've wanted to express your understanding of your worldview. Your worldview as a person with Scorpio rising is a place of a lot of tenderness. You really, um, you're a protector in some way. Your worldview, you really probably believe that people need to be protected and supported on an emotional level. And possibly the difficulty is in seeing how that's not reflected in your country at large.
Mhm.
Not to bring such things into it, but there you have it.
Yes.
So, at any rate, now you are really opening up this expansiveness of understanding how deep your worldview is in its desire to support and protect.
Mhm.
Hmm. So, where's the challenge?
Well,
We
there's a couple
know
of
there's one here.
I know. Well, first of all, when Jupiter first enters Cancer, right in the beginning, or second part of June there, it kind of immediately encounters a lot of difficulty. And for those of you with Scorpio rising, that difficulty is represented in your kind of daily life, your day-to-day routines. There is something about that that feels restrictive, that feels as if it's coming at odds with your desire to expand your worldview and expand the way you think about things, and perhaps the experiences that you really want to have in order to kind of expand your education essentially in the way that you think about the world. And it is really easy to think about this, even as just as an example about politics, because there's some way that there was something that maybe you really don't like, that happened, and I think it is easy because it's the same time frame of issues coming up, feeling triggered, feeling upset, and then very much that impacting your daily life, and impacting all the day-to-day things that you want to do and the way you want to handle your, each you go to work, maybe you go to work and there's somebody that you completely disagree with, and you just feel triggered. That could easily be, just an easy way to think about how the kind of annoyance might
Where you
manifest.
lost your job.
Yeah, exactly. Or your job got cut because now there's this new thing. Exactly. So and with Jupiter now moving into that ninth house, and you're taking all the stuff that you've learned, this challenge around dealing with other people's issues, you're feeling some annoyance about the way things have gone down in the culture, and there's an impact on you. And with Jupiter moving in there, you have a chance to kind of reset and kind of reintegrate and figure out how to bring your emotional being online with what's happening in a way that you can manage. You might need to take a break. I mean, Jupiter and Cancer is certainly an invitation for all of us to make sure that we retreat and we rejuvenate, our emotional selves in order to manage what's going on in the world. So I think there's a lot about
Hmm.
those pieces. But yeah, those are some reflections.
Yeah, there's also, you can think of Jupiter moving into that house as a really great time to study something new or to travel. You'll learn so much. And
Yeah.
again, you want to think about the overexpansion of it. You want to really avoid over blind optimism. That could be an issue. Or yeah, um conspiracy theories, an over identification with ideas. So you want to really examine what your worldview is and be clear where, practical, you have to stay practical in this as
I
well.
do. I get what you're saying though too. Like maybe the need to expand beyond your usual day-to-day routines in order to come back with a better understanding. So maybe it is the time to, if you can, like go on an adventure, go on a trip, in the summer, and let it refresh you and rejuvenate your attitude about humanity. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could look at that, but I like this. I think we're kind of getting the gist. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's fascinating. All right, I think we're
Okay.
ready to move.
Sagittarius rising. All right, so those of you with Sagittarius rising, Jupiter moving into Cancer means that it is going into your eighth house. Now, the eighth house is one of the sort of hidden, secretive houses that has to do with, well, in the old days, was it taxes, sex, and death, pretty much? So we have a little bit of a modern interpretation nowadays. But the eighth house really does pertain to that place where you start, as you're in relationships with people, you get to a more intimate level and you start bumping into each other's baggage. And it's the place where you have to figure out how to share resources with other people. And no matter what you do, when you do that, it always brings stuff up because everybody's got baggage around their values and their resources, and money is it's part of who we are at this
That's
point in
sex.
culture. Yeah, and sex totally. So there's things that come up in that eighth house. Now it's really helpful to think about the eighth house in terms of boundaries, especially with Cancer here, because if you have Cancer in the eighth house, then your emotional layers and your emotional being is very much connected to how you connect with other people. So it is a place where you're going to really need and enjoy some real intimacy. And so, by definition, you need to have some protection around that too. So it's very important for those of you with Sagittarius rising to have boundaries in place about how you handle your emotional nature. And when Jupiter moves in there, number one is that's going to increase that need, Jupiter fold, many times over. It's going to really expand that. But it's also going to expand your ability to be generous in that department, to be more abundant in that department, to be not be quite so like, battened down and protective, but a little more open and intuitive and trusting of the process you have with other people in your intimate relationships. Part of that is to do with the fact that Jupiter is being in Gemini and you've had a chance to really the last year kind of expand your notion of partnerships, to embrace perhaps a new mindset about the way you handle your one-on-one intimate connections with other people. And so then when Jupiter moves into this eighth house, it's kind of like a part two to something you've already been learning and an opportunity to take it to a deeper layer of the self. So yeah.
I keep thinking mutual respect.
Mm.
Sharing resources, an expansion of our understanding of how we connect with others on those deep, deep levels. And that one of the things that really can expand here is this mutual respect, this mutual ability to set boundaries that really support a deeply powerful relationship. I think that can be a really beautiful way of looking at it. You also, that eighth house is deep and it is tricky, and you do want to pay attention to over identification with other people's ideals.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to keep that in mind. And then we want to bring in the little snag at the beginning of this period of time, the first few weeks there, until early July. We have this situation where there's a real struggle to get this expansion going. There's a way in which um, our understanding of how we give of ourselves is in conflict with this expanding development to respect each other's boundaries. There's some way in which how we give of ourselves has to be faced and seen for what it is rather than for what we imagine it to be. I think that's what the struggle is. What am I missing there? I feel like I'm missing something.
Well, I think as you're talking, I'm just thinking like, well, that's because everything in a relationship is a negotiation. I mean, relationships are made up. So you want to give of yourself a certain way, but now you're encountering this shared space. And that's just, I feel like that's
So
just sort of
different.
normal, right? The back and forth of relationship of trying to figure out, okay, I want to give myself this way, but I got to think about the other person involved here too. And always with these types of tensions, you're not trying to do one over the other. You're trying to look at both, ends of whatever the issue is, how you want to give of yourself and then how you want to have boundaries with this other person or other people. And you're trying to figure out how to do both, how to respect
Yeah.
both. So back
Yeah.
to the mutual respect term that you brought up,
Right.
you know?
Right. I think that
Yeah.
that issue of mutual respect is just so important. And it's a wonderful opportunity to really look and really learn about, yeah, how do I give of myself at the same time as I am developing this mutual emotional connection.
Yeah.
And they feel like they're at odds with each other, but they're really allowing a movement forward to really develop something pretty great.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah. I know, and I think too, the other pieces too, like you've kind of had a little bit of a shot across the bow for the last few months too, like in, the earlier part of this year, like there may have been, just think back, and were there places that were, you were having some real annoyances or struggles with, whoever you're connected to in one-on-one relationships, that there might have been some things that you're like, oh man, and you just get to use that for greater understanding of what's happening. So,
I like that. That's fascinating.
yeah.
All
So.
right, let's go on.
Let's do it. All right. So those of you with Capricorn rising.
Those of you with Capricorn rising have Jupiter stepping up over the horizon and into the seventh house. For the past 6 years, your expansions have been so internally focused. And now they come into more public view, into an expansion of the importance of partnership for you. The seventh house is all about partnership. I think of it as contractual relationship. So it's not just your marriage partner or your spouse. It's all contractual relationships, business partnerships, your therapist, whatever, all of these kind of contractual relationships. The guy you just hired to build the deck on your house, that's a contractual relationship. So all of these areas of how you connect with others is what really wants to expand. Over the past year, the expansion has been around how you take care of yourself, how you function in your day-to-day routines, and that is giving way to, and it's bringing that energy of, okay, now I know how to function and care for myself. Now I'm ready to expand this understanding of how I do relationship. There's
Mm,
been some challenge over the last few months or so. There's been some difficulty, some aggravation in your relationship that has really, kind of highlighted this area as a place that needs to be settled down. And now we're going into this full year of expansion here. As
mm,
we start this year of expanding relationship, we hit a bit of a wall. We hit a little bit of a difficulty for the first few weeks until early July. And where is that coming from, Jenny?
Well, for Capricorn rising, that's coming from something to do with your home life. It could be something to do with parents. I mean, some of us have aging parents, so it could be something to do with that. And it could be something to do with your physical house, your home, the place that you live, that there's something about that that is feeling like it's preventing you from expanding partnership in some way. So there's something at odds, like maybe you're, have a new partner and you want to move in together, but you've got to get through this hurdle of like selling your house or something like that. Like something where you have to kind of what is it, hashtag do adulting, Like, there's something that there's some kind of pressure being put on you. Now, this also can be something that is deeply emotional, that connects with the very roots of your being, that is you maybe haven't been able to see before, and because you've met somebody new or something like that, you're having to confront that about yourself. So
Mhm.
there's a number of different ways that this whole thing can play out,
Mhm.
but it's really essentially your most kind of private self that is somehow coming into seemingly odds with something to do with your partnerships. So that's what's butting heads against each other. And the idea here is not that you pick one over the other, you're only doing one. You're trying to figure out how to address both. You're trying to figure out how to mature in one area of your life so that the next part can also expand in a way that you are, overall evolving, not just splitting into two pieces. So I think that's part of it. And when you really think about the fact that you've probably gone through some aggravation or irritation in the past few months that has to do with partnerships. And again, Laurie mentioned any contractual relationship. So what has happened, in the months like January through April-ish that was, painful or aggravating, or a place you had to say no, or something that came about that did not quite go how you thought. And that is actually just part of your education that is allowing you to say, it's very clarifying. Something went wrong there. You have this clarification. Now you maybe do know what you want as far as the partnership or the contractual obligation or whatever. Like, it seems to me that there's a clarification that's happened. Didn't come easy, probably, but helpful nonetheless.
But, given that Jupiter's going to be in there for a year, I just also do want to bring in the potential of overextension.
Mhm.
Yeah, don't meet somebody and get married 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
But there is that tendency with Jupiter going into that seventh house. It's like, oh, this is the relationship of a lifetime, that over enthusiasm and idealization. Slow down, slow
Yeah,
down.
good point.
Yeah.
Or you don't want to deal with aging parents who are like, I'm going to run away and go off. Nope, you need to do
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. You can
So,
guarantee if you do that overextension and fly into, full bore into a relationship, that when Jupiter goes into Leo next year, you're going to have some serious boundaries to set.
yes. So, all right. Well, hopefully you get the gist of that one.
Right.
All right, so let's move on to Aquarius rising. Those of you with Aquarius rising, this Jupiter moving into Cancer is therefore moving into your sixth house. Your sixth house, I actually like the sixth house because it's really the place, the routines, the practices, all the things that you do that ultimately make up your lifestyle. So you think about, brushing your teeth, things as mundane as that, but also just your overall, like, how do you eat? How are your sleeping patterns at the moment? Like, what's going on in this part of your life? And the sixth house also refers to, it can be related to your work life because your work life is part of your schedule. And the sixth house definitely has some things about scheduling and how you organize your time. So all of those things are where Cancer is moving into. So, and for you, you have a deeply emotional connection to those routines. Like, they are very important for you
Mhm.
and how you maintain your emotional stasis, and how you make sure that you're nurturing yourself on an emotional level. I mean, that is something that is hugely important to how you handle your daily routines and so on. So with Jupiter moving in here, all those needs get bigger. It becomes even more important for you to make sure you're, setting aside time, that you're rejuvenating, that you're getting a chance to retreat and restore yourself on the daily. I mean, I think about this and I just think, if you're somebody who lives near water, you need to paddleboard. You need to get out on a boat, a place where you can have peace and quiet and silence in the middle of a pond, or even on a river. So I just can't help but think of that. There's something about really nourishing yourself on that water emotional level. And Jupiter has been in Gemini for the year before this, kind of obviously. For you, this has really allowed you to see how you love, like how you give of yourself. Maybe you've expanded some kind of creative project that you just are thrilled about, that gives you a lot of delight. Maybe you've taken some real intellectual risks in the last year where you've just tried something new, and your mindset about who you really are on a profound level of giving yourself. Maybe there's some education you've gotten about that. And I really like that because now it's time to take that creative thing that you're doing, this way of giving yourself, and start making that into something that you do on the daily, something that you incorporate, so a way of really giving yourself in a different manner. So I like that idea. But Lori, what
Yeah.
do you have to say about this? Because there's definitely
Well,
some snags.
well, yeah, there are. And I also am thinking about Yeah, the overextension of Jupiter there in that sixth house. I just want to touch on that a little bit more because we can, with Jupiter in the sixth house, we can really, I want to say romanticize productivity and just take on too much. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I can do this and I can do that and I can do the other. And then all of a sudden our schedule is so overloaded that our emotional life kind of can collapse beneath that amount of day-to-day stuff.
Mm.
So you want to really be careful of that. But also, what we're thinking about is in the first few weeks of this year that Jupiter will be in Cancer until early in July, there is a way in which the struggle to get moving into the expansion has to be paid attention to. And the struggle comes from some way that you are suddenly aware that your your ability to speak up for yourself, possibly it's in that, like there's some way that you need to speak up for yourself in order to expand your own emotional control of your lifestyle.
Mm. Hmm.
There's some way that you're learning about how you think and how that needs to support this ability to expand. It could be, a neighbor or a sibling trying to prevent you from doing the day to day the way you need to for your emotional nature. It could just be coming from your own understanding of how you use your voice.
Mm. Yeah. I like what you said before about just, Jupiter going to the sixth house. Like the sixth house is not one of the easier houses. So there is the possibility for it to lead into excess or overextension in some way. Especially if you're feeling, all sort of insecure about the way you move in your neighborhood, that might be a tendency to overdo, overdo, overdo. I think that is a real danger here. And I think one of the big lessons is going to be how much space are you giving yourself for rest? Like, are you giving yourself enough window to chill
Yeah.
out because you really need it? And then when you do that, then you can use your voice in this mature and gosh, assertive way that you uniquely can do.
I'm thinking about that expansion also in terms of, your health. And I
Yeah.
just had this image of someone, Jupiter goes into their sixth house and all of a sudden they feel like they need, every vitamin in the world and every, I don't know, expanding that,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know, be careful. You can overextend yourself in trying to create the perfect health
yeah,
for,
and if you need clues, think back January through April. There was probably some irritations or aggravations or something that you learned that maybe you weren't able to say no to some things that you really needed to say no to, and that you've had that opportunity to kind of what are those aggravations? What are the things, maybe you had trouble with sleep or something like that. And you really just need to like look at that and let that inform you so that when Jupiter moves in here, you really have the capacity to know what you need in
interesting.
order to have good self-care. So,
Yeah. Huh.
all right.
Nice. Nice.
All right. So we are on to Pisces rising.
All right. So if you have Pisces rising, this is lovely. I just love this. Just thinking about Jupiter moving into your fifth house. The fifth house is, it's the house of fun. It's the house of where we give of ourselves, where we show love. It's our creativity. It connects us to the people we love, children, play, taking risks for enjoyment, all of those kind of things. So clearly, Jupiter moving in there can bring a lot more space for fun and pleasure, all those things. It can also bring a lot of excess. So you want to work to balance those issues. You want to make sure you are expanding your emotional ability to give of yourself at the same time as you're not overdoing it. Um, for the past year, Jupiter moved through your fourth house, kind of expanding your connection to home, family, roots, ancestry, all of those fourth house issues. You've really developed a greater understanding of what that area means and bringing that now into how you give of yourself. So for the last few months, there's been some sort of challenge, some sort of frustration, maybe in a creative way. There's been a frustration in getting yourself going on some creative project, something along those lines, that now Jupiter will, in the coming year, really support you to assimilate that difficulty and allow it to inform how this area grows. As Jupiter enters this area, for the first few weeks of it, we've got a little bit of a problem. Where do you see that problem showing up?
Well, interesting. It's coming to do, it has to do with your resources. So resources, it might be your finances, like there's a money issue that might be popping up that you're like, ooh, how do I handle that? It also could be more on a personal level of, learning to see yourself as a courageous person, learning that you have this
Mm.
value of this, person who's got a lot of courage and a lot of ability to start something new. I don't know, there's something about those that could really feel like a restriction. I mean, certainly if you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna, do all these artistic projects because Jupiter's moving to Cancer, well, guess what? Those cost money. And they might also take you away from your work, and so then you're making even less money. So I think there's some kind of challenge being issued to you as far as like this kind of a reality check to do with whatever your resources are. I mean, it could be just that you don't have enough even personal emotional resource to do something, and you're being unrealistic about how much you can give of yourself, and there's just this check on like, actually, you know what, that's where your resources end, so there's only so much you can do. But with all these things, it's about finding balance. It's about honoring both ends of it. It's not about shutting down the creative thing or the playful thing you want to do or the risk-taking fun thing, and it's not about ignoring reality of whatever your resources and your finances can handle. It's about dealing with both and kind of looking at both and figuring out what's the way to handle it. And some of the clues that you can use are, there has been some challenge in these past few months, like sort of January through April, of like, I don't know, something that came up that has to do with the way you give of yourself, or something that, you really want to have fun, but somebody rained on your parade, and that you felt really annoyed and aggravated and felt like you were being negated or shut down in some way, in the way you want to give of yourself. And whatever happens, whatever issue you kind of dealt with in those few months, whatever thing was coming up that was triggering, now you get to kind of use that as a greater understanding of yourself. How do you make meaning of whatever that challenge was and incorporate that so that you actually can give of yourself in a way that is even more generous and expansive without being overbearing? Like over mothering would be an issue here, and over, or simply giving too much of yourself and losing yourself a bit. Like that's, what you want to do is kind of find that nice middle ground where you're maturing, you're growing, you're listening to cues, but you're also able to give of yourself in a way that feels satisfying and nurturing. So yeah.
One other thing I want to throw out here, I can't help it.
Yeah.
But if you are of childbearing years and you have an intimate male partner, be aware of that, because Jupiter moving into the fifth house, if you want children, it's a great time. If you don't want children, be careful. I'm just going to say that. I've seen it time and time again. Jupiter moves into the fifth house, babies are created. It happens a lot. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind as well.
Especially in Cancer, right? So it's like, because that's part of that whole thing we were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want a baby and Jupiter's moving into your fifth house, yeah, it's a great time for that. All right. I think we're at the end.
All right. I think we are too. So I'm going to stop sharing and say thank
Uh,
you to everybody.
yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jenny. And we'll do another video next time.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.